Before we write a single line of code, take a moment and look at what's on the screen. Right in the center, on a clean, dark background, there's a sleek, modern color palette card that instantly feels polished. The layout is compact and balanced, with soft, rounded corners and a clean, minimal structure that looks straight out of a professional design tool. Across the top, 5 carefully chosen colors sit side by side, forming a smooth, horizontal palette. As you hover over each color, it expands fluidly, pushing the others aside while lifting slightly with a soft shadow. At the same time, the hex code fades in at the center, clean and readable, creating a subtle but satisfying interaction that feels responsive and intentional. Below the palette, a slim white stats bar anchors the design, showing a save count on one side and a minimal SVG options icon on the other. The contrast, spacing, and typography keep everything calm, modern, and easy on the eyes. No JavaScript, no heavy effects, just clean HTML and CSS working together to create a professional interactive UI component. And in this video, we're going to build this exact color palette from scratch, step by step. So let's get started. But before we start, please like this video and subscribe to the channel to motivate me. So let's start. We are starting with the HTML structure for this project. Inside the body of the document, we begin with a div that has a class called container. This container is going to hold everything we see on the screen. Inside the container, we have another div with a class named palette. Think of this as the section that will display all of our colors side by side. Within the palette, we create multiple divs, each one using the class color. Each color div represents a single color panel in the palette. Inside every color div, we place a span element. The span simply holds text, which in this case is a color value written out so the user can see it. We repeat the structure several times, so we end up with multiple color panels, each one containing a different value. This repetition is what allows us to create a full color palette layout using the same markup pattern. After the palette section, still inside the container, we add another div. This one uses an ID called stats. This section is meant to hold some informational content below the colors. Inside the stats div, we first include a span element that displays a piece of text showing how many saves there are. Right after that, we include an SVG element. This SVG is used to display a small icon, and inside it we define a path that draws the shape of that icon. That completes the HTML structure. Everything is wrapped neatly inside the container with a palette on top and a stats section underneath, ready to be styled with CSS later on. All right, everybody, now we move into the CSS, starting from the very top and going in order. We begin by selecting the body element. We set the height to 100 VH, so the body takes up the full height of the viewport. We then change the display to flex. This allows us to easily center our content. With justify content set to center and align items set to center, the container will be perfectly centered horizontally and vertically. Finally, we set the background color to a very dark value using a hex color of #0E0E0E0E. Next, we select the container class. We give it a height of 200 pixels and a width of 350 pixels. We round the corners by setting the border radius to 1 em. To make sure nothing spills outside those rounded corners, we set overflow to hidden. We also define the font family as sans serif, so all text inside the container uses a clean, modern font. After that, we move on to the palette class. We set its display to flex so the color panels line up horizontally. The height is set to 86%, which means it takes up most of the container's height. The width is set to 100%, so it stretches across the entire container. Now we style the color class. We set the height to 100%, so each color fills the palette vertically. We use flex 1, so each color panel takes up equal space by default. Display is set to flex again, so we can center the text inside. Align items is set to center, and justify content is set to center, placing the text directly in the middle. The text color is set to white, the font weight is set to 600, and letter spacing is set to 1 pixel to give the text a little breathing room. Finally, we add a transition on the flex property with a duration of 0.1 seconds and a linear timing function so size changes animate smoothly. Continuing down the style sheet, the next selector targets the span elements inside each color panel. For color span, we set the opacity to 0 so the text is hidden by default. We also apply a transition on the opacity property with a duration of 0.1 seconds and a linear timing function, allowing the text to fade in smoothly later on. Next, we start assigning background colors to each individual color panel using the nth child selector. For the first color panel, we set the background to the hex value hash 264653. This gives us a deep blue-green tone. For the second color panel, we use nth child 2 and set the background to the hex value hash 2A9D8F, which is a softer teal color. For the third color panel, using nth child 3, we set the background to the hex value hash E9C46A. This creates a warm yellow tone. For the fourth color panel, using nth child 4, the background is set to the hex value hash F4A261, giving us a light orange color. For the fifth color panel, using nth child 5, we set the background to the hex value hash E76F51, which results in a muted red-orange color. After that, we add hover styles for the color panels. When a color is hovered, we change the flex value to 2. This makes the hovered panel grow larger than the others. We also add a box shadow using RGBA with values 100, 100, 111, and 0.2, along with offsets of 0 pixels horizontally, 7 pixels vertically, and a blur of 29 pixels, creating a soft floating effect. Moving forward, we now handle what happens to the text when a color panel is hovered. We target color hover span. When the parent color div is hovered, we set the opacity of the span to 1. This makes the text appear smoothly thanks to the transition we defined earlier. Next, we style the stats section by selecting the element with the ID stats. We set the height to 14% and the width to 100%, so it fills the bottom portion of the container. The background is set to white, giving it a clean contrast against the dark colors above. We then set the display to flex. Align items is set to center, so the content is vertically centered. Justify content is set to space between, which pushes the text to the left and the icon to the right. Padding is set to 0 on the top and bottom and 1.5 EM on the left and right to give the content some breathing room. Box sizing is set to border box, so padding is included in the total size calculations. Finally, the text color is set to a muted gray using the hex value hash 837D7D. Lastly, we target the SVG inside the stats section. We set the fill color to the same gray value of hash 837D7D so it matches the text. We also apply a transform with scale set to 1.2, slightly increasing the size of the icon so it stands out visually. All right, everybody, that brings us to the end of the style sheet. At this point, every element from the HTML has been fully styled. And that's how our project looks. I hope you're not tired, and that's the end of today's tutorial video. I am so sorry saying this, but please like the video if you liked and watched up to here, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new tutorial videos. See you in the next one. Have a sweet time.